What is up, y'all? So, today we are going to be looking at the tools that we have for typography inside of Adobe Illustrator and Adobe InDesign. Why are we skipping Adobe Photoshop? Because when it comes to working with type, long story short, or it may still be a long story, type is a vector-based graphic. And in order for it to really perform at its best visually, it should be handled primarily in vector-based software. So where does that leave us? Adobe Illustrator, Adobe InDesign. Both of those can handle vector-based graphics like champs. Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based software that is used to create other vector-based objects, though it can handle bitmapped or pixel-based images. And the same holds true for Adobe InDesign as well. So when we're talking about working with type, we're talking about those two software platforms specifically. Does that mean that you absolutely cannot use type in Photoshop? No, it doesn't mean that. Photoshop has type tools in it, but you should never set large amounts, moderate amounts, even medium amounts of type inside of Adobe Photoshop. You want to avoid typesetting in Photoshop as much as possible because Photoshop is a pixel-based, bitmap-based software, and it will not play friendly with your vector-based type all the time or most of the time. So with that set to the side, let's dive in and look at Adobe Illustrator and talk about our type tools. So first things first, where do you find your type tools? Up here at the top of our window, as you can see, we have our menu bar. And inside of our menu bar is where you'll find a slew of really important things. But what we're looking at specifically is this guy, window. When I click on it, it opens up all of the options that are available to us for our panels. And the one that you're looking for specifically is this guy that says type. Inside of type, there's a flyout menu, and that flyout menu has all of our different options that are available for manipulating, working with, selecting, handling our type, right? So I've already gone through and opened the ones that are important to us. They're over here, as you can see. We have our character panel, paragraph, type styles, paragraph styles, glyphs, open type. Those are some of the things that we're going to look at today when we're talking about working with type inside of Adobe Illustrator. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So this is our Adobe Illustrator interface, and we already looked at our menu, where our panels are, and the panels that we're going to be working with today. Another important thing you need to be mindful of when we're working with type in Illustrator is our drum roll, our type tool. So this guy over here within our tool menu, our toolbar here, we're looking for this, which is our type tool. Now, I want you to notice that there's this little arrow in the corner. What that means is that if you click and hold, oops, if you click and hold, you're going to get this menu of other type options that are nested inside of your main type tool. So your type tool, that one's simple. That is your standard straight lines of text on a page. That's what that'll do. Your area type tool, type on a path tool, vertical type tool. These names are all self-explanatory. Your area type tool will type inside of the area of a shape. Your type on a path tool will type on a path. Your vertical type tool will type vertical type. Vertical area type tool is a combination of this guy and this guy. It will type vertical type inside of the area of a shape. And then we have our vertical type on a path tool, combination of our vertical type tool and our type on a path tool. This will again type vertically on a path. And then our touch type tool is something pretty cool, and will it takes a little bit more of a hands-on explanation of what that is. So we'll look at your touch type tool a little bit more in a minute, right? Other tools that are important to working with type, your selection tools. So your your selection tool rather will let you grab your shape, move it around, make your type larger, put your type in different places on your page, so on and so forth. So this guy is important as well. When it comes down to creating paths to type on, your shapes are important. So your rectangle tool, ellipses tool, polygon tool, those are important if you're trying to create a path that you can type on. So is your pen tool and your curvature tool. These guys will all let you create a path, but so will this guy, which is just your line segment tool. So there's a lot of different tools here that can work their way into your process when you're creating type within Adobe Illustrator, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and select my type tool, and I'm gonna come over here, and all I'm doing is clicking on my canvas, and automatically in Adobe Illustrator, this is a default feature of the program. When you're in your type tool and you click, it is going to automatically drop in filler text on your page so that you can start working with it, right? Now it filled it in with Laura Ipsum. I can come in and I can add more type, so on and so forth, but it will automatically add in filler text whenever you click on your page. Something else you can do with your type tool as well, instead of clicking and releasing, you can click and hold and drag out a text box to whatever size you need. So right now I am clicking and holding my mouse. I have not released my mouse yet. And when I release it, it is going to create a text box to the size that I just dragged, I hate that word, that I just dragged my mouse out to create a text box of the appropriate size that I was looking for, right? And again, it's filled automatically with filler text, but I can go in and change that filler text to anything I want to change it to, right? So I'm gonna get rid of this big block of text, and we're gonna focus for right now on this. In fact, I'm going to get rid of this too, and we'll get a fresh one. So we're going to start for right now focusing on this little line of text that we added in, right? I'm going to make it bigger. To do that, I'm in my selection tool, and I'm going to go over to one of my anchors. Notice when I hover over all of these different anchors on my bounding box, the bounding box is the box around our letter forms. Notice when I hover over it, I get this nice little double-headed arrow. That arrow is letting me know that as soon as I click my mouse and start dragging, I'm going to start reshaping my text. Now, click and drag, look what's happening. What I'm doing right now, I am scaling my type, I'm making it larger, but notice how distorted it's getting as I drag my mouse, right? What's happening here is I started to resize my text, but I am not scaling it proportionately. It is so critically important when you scale your type, unless you have a specific reason for scaling it in a way that is not proportionate to its original dimensions, that you scale it proportionately. And like, there is a place for all kinds of different design decisions, but those design decisions have to be well thought out and purposeful. And unless you have a well thought out, purposeful reason for scaling anything, type, an image, anything against its original proportions, then you need to scale it proportionately. How do you do that? I'm going to come in and I'm just going to hold my shift key held, release, held, release. Notice what happens. The shift key, what it does is it locks your text in to its proportionate dimensions, so that when you scale it, and the same thing holds true for images as well, when you scale it, it holds on to its original proportion. So I'm going to make it about this big. I'm going to release my mouse and then release my shift key. Now, so this is our text. And we're going to just go through and talk about, what some of our different options here do, what they're good for, so on and so forth. Right off the bat, starting with character, opening up this menu, it's something that I'm sure you've seen before, even if you're not familiar with Adobe Illustrator. We've all seen a drop-down menu of this kind, something along these lines that let you select your typeface. So inside of this drop-down menu, I have on this side the name of all of my typefaces. On this side, I have a text sample of what my type would look like if I chose that specific typeface. I'm going to go ahead and select this one. So inside of this particular option, it lets you change your typeface. This bottom one that says regular, it lets you change to different alternative styles that are built into that specific typeface. So for this one, I have regular and then light. Those are built in. But if I come in and let's pick a different one like Arial Rounded. Oh, that one only has regular. Let's see. How about this guy? So pick an Avenir. If I open it up, notice all the different options that we have. Light, light oblique, book, Roman, medium, black, heavy. There's all of these different options inside of this second drop-down menu. So the first one lets you pick your typeface. The second one lets you pick the style of your typeface. If it's light, if it's black, so on and so forth. Remember when we talked about the different types of file formats that can exist for fonts, and we talked about OpenType and how OpenType can hold thousands of different types of characters. This is one of the benefits of OpenType. It allows you to have all of these different variations on the same typeface built into one font file, right? So other options, let's go back to, let's just do felt marker. All right, so we have felt marker. We have two options. We have thin and wide. We're going to stick with wide and keep it moving. So this next guy here lets you change the size of your typeface. So you can use your arrows to click up and down gradually. You can come inside this drop down and increase gradually if you would like, or rapidly. Or you can come here and type in the size that you're looking for. I want you to pay attention that inside this menu, the minimum it gives you is 6, the maximum it gives you is 72. This is not at all the minimum and the maximum that you have available to you. You can type 4 if you want to. You can type 200 if you want to. So this is not the minimum or maximum that is available to you. Your minimum and maximum is whatever you decide to type in. Here, right now, my typeface is 1,000 points. I'm gonna bring it back down. I also want you to notice I'm holding down my shift key and scaling, that I can scale my type size up and down, and notice that my point size will change along the way as well, right? So this particular option talks about your leading, and we're going to talk about things like editing your leading a little bit, or like finessing your type in general a little bit later. But for now, no, when we're talking about leading, we're talking about the amount of space between your lines of type. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 18. I'm going to delete that and try again. Right. So here it looks like I only have 2 lines of text, but what's really happening is, look how much space is in between those lines. It's because my leading is 120 points. I can come here just like my type size, and I can use my arrow to bring that number down. Notice how they get closer together. I can use my drop down menu to go up gradually or quickly depending on what I'm looking for. And the same way that I can type in my point size here, I can also type in the point size of my leading here as well, right? I'm gonna just come over here and select all of this, copy it, and paste it a few times so that you can really see the full effects of our leading. So this is making it larger. I want you to notice for a moment this little red plus sign that appears here. This is letting me know that I have text that exceeds the boundaries of my bounding box, meaning that there is more text available than what is visible inside of this box on our screen right now. And I'm going to drop it down. Notice that as soon as all my text is visible within this box, the plus sign goes away, right? So there's a couple of other different options here, and we're not going to get into all of them because they're all really not super important for us to cover, but we are going to talk about our tracking and we're going to talk about our kerning. These two things are important. And again, as I already mentioned, we'll talk about those more in depth a little bit later as well. So if I come over here and I select my whole body of text and I come to my tracking, notice what is happening. What tracking allows you to do, and this also applies to kerning, but it changes the amount of space from one letter to the next, the space between those letters. Now, the important difference between tracking and kerning is that tracking is universal, meaning that it is meant to change all the spacing between all your text at once. And kerning is meant to work between individual sets of letters. So I can come here and select these letters specifically, and then I can come and select those letters specifically. I can pick optical, I can pick auto, and with optical, it'll change the spacing based on what looks good. And or with the computer, with the software, things looks good. And with auto, it'll adjust it based on what it thinks it should be. I can set it to 0. It's not letting me, oh, it's not letting me because I have too many letters selected. So if I come here and let's see, to modify the spacing between multiple characters. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's giving me this error message. And what it's basically saying is to modify the spacing between multiple letters, I need to use the tracking because I have multiple letters selected. So with the 3 letters and I do this, I get that error message. With the 2 letters, I get that same error message. But if I bring it down to 1, let's go. And then I start making my adjustments. So it looks like all of these letters are inching along, but what's actually happening is I'm only changing the space between my A and my D. I'll bring it back down. So the main difference between tracking and kerning is that tracking changes the universal spacing between multiple letters. And I can select this entire body of text to do tracking to. I can select one singular word to do tracking. Notice that it's changing the spacing between all of those letters. I can come and select 2 letters and change the tracking between those letter forms, which is interesting because at this point you're essentially doing what kerning does as well because you selected those 2 letters. And I can come through and just put my cursor where I need it to be, and then I can adjust my kerning. But notice what happens when I adjust my tracking. Nothing happens. In previous versions of Illustrator, you used to be able to select the individual letter that you wanted to apply kerning to, and then you could adjust your kerning up and down. In this newer update of Illustrator, it doesn't allow you to select the letter at all. You simply put the cursor where you want it to be. This is a good thing because in previous versions, when you selected the letter and you adjusted the kerning, it didn't just adjust the kerning on, say, the side you wanted it to adjust on. It would also adjust the kerning on the other side of the letter as well. So with this option that is a part of this new version of Illustrator, putting the cursor where you want it to be to adjust the kerning is pretty awesome because it's only going to adjust the spacing exactly where you think it should, right? So that's some of the main tools that are inside of our character panel. We have other things that are really helpful as well. Like down at the bottom, we have this guy, which will automatically change all of your letters to capital letters. This guy will change everything into small caps. So we have our initial capital letter and then we have our small caps. Now, this will only work if the specific typeface you're working with, if that font file has small caps built into it. This one does have small caps, so then it went ahead and created a dynamic of small caps along with our capital letters as well. And then there's things where you can add superscripts and subscripts, and you can strike a line through your text, you can underline your text, so on and so forth. So there's a few other different options inside of our character panel. The next panel we're going to talk about is our paragraph panel. And this one, as its name suggests, deals with the whole of your paragraph. So this is where you're going to find things like changing your alignment, where you can go through and you can do center, you can do right align, you can do left justified, completely justified, or center justified rather, right justified, and this is all justified on all sides. You have indentions that you can do, like a few different options that are available. There's also hyphenate. I make a regular practice of turning off my hyphenations. Why? Because you don't want your text to have a prolific amount of hyphenations. It makes readability more difficult than it needs to be. So I typically go in, I turn this guy off, I turn off hyphenations, which is inside of our paragraph panel. And if I notice that my rag, which is this side, your rag is the other side of your aligned text, the rough side of your aligned text, and you want this side to be nice and neat. You don't want it to be like too dramatic in terms of going in and out. So if I see that my rag is a little bit too intense, then I may come in and turn hyphenation back on and then go in and manually edit. Like I will manually do line breaks so that I can get rid of some of the hyphenations if there are too many. What do I mean by line breaks? I mean, I simply go in before a word, I position my cursor there and just hit enter to automatically take that word down to the next line of text, right? So our character panel and our paragraph panel, these two probably contain information that you are already very familiar with. When we get to things like our character styles and our paragraph styles, this is a little bit different and it may contain information that you aren't 100% familiar with. How does this work exactly? So what this does is it records information. So say I were to come and select this text and I were to change, if I say I was to come in and select this text and then change the color of it to this color, and then say I was to let's also change the size of it as well. I'm going to just adjust the size of my window a little bit. So say I was to come in and then also change the size of it and then make it thin. I could, we could leave it, we'll leave it white. So I could come in, once I make those changes I want to make to this text, I can come over to my character style and then hit plus while that text is still selected. What I'm doing when I hit this is I'm creating a new character style. You'll see it pop up here. It says character style 1. And what I've done is I've recorded the changes that I've made to this. So then I can easily come in, select new text, hit character style, and it will automatically add those changes to other text within my document. So it makes it a lot easier to make repeated changes. So if there's some kind of change you're making to your text repeatedly, you can save it as a character style, and then you can easily go in and re-reference those changes by simply selecting the text and then clicking that character style and applying those changes. And if you want to like get more organized with your workflow, you can double click character style and you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it pink text. And so then I know, like, oh, if I select this, I use this particular character style, then it's going to change my text into pink text, right? And paragraph style does something very similar. So it allows you to, again, I'm going to make, let's see, I'm going to make another little box of text here. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to change the size of it. So I'll make it 6 point. I'm going to just add a bit more text. I'm going to select it, turn my leading down a bit. So I have this paragraph worth of text. So I will copy it. Bear with me while I create text for us to work with. There we are. All right, so I have this paragraph of text. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the color of it back to black. I'm also going to center align it. I'm going to indent my first paragraph here, or the first line of my paragraph. And hyphenation is already off, so I'm not going to turn it on. So I can come over here to paragraph styles, do the same thing and hit plus. It's going to document the paragraph styles of this particular text that I have here. So if I come through and say I create another paragraph of text, and I'm just going to go through and manually edit it. I'm going to get rid of all the changes that I've done to it. Yeah, in fact, I'll outdent it. There we go. All right, so I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to come into my paragraph styles. And when I hit paragraph style 1, it's going to apply. It applied my changes, but it also changed. Oh, it recorded my original typeface size. So I'm going to go ahead and make it small. And then here we go. Sorry about that, y'all. So it recorded the paragraph style changes that I made here. So we have our indent, and then we have our center align the same as this. But it also recorded when I originally started making the changes and my text was highlighted, it recorded the type size and the leading of this paragraph, because that was what I originally added when I created this in the first place, along with the color of that text, because that was also a part of this as well. But long story short, and outside of that simple mistake, our character styles and our paragraph styles allow us to store information so that we can use it later in our designs. The next thing we're going to talk about is glyphs, and glyphs are pretty fun. So again, we talked about our open type file format when we're talking about the different formats that our fonts could be saved in. And depending on the format, if it's open type, there's a whole lot of versatility for the types and the amount of different characters that can exist within that same font file. Here we are looking at the glyphs for the particular typeface that we're working with, which is marker felt. So all of these are the different glyphs for that particular typeface. So I can come in and add in my glyphs by simply double clicking. I want you to notice that the glyphs are following the style of the other letters that are around it. So not just in its color, but also in its size as well. It's going to follow the same tracking, not tracking, I apologize. It's going to follow the same leading, so on and so forth. So you can just simply go in, find the glyph that you're looking for, And then when you double click it, it will add that glyph to your text, right? And then you have your entire font, which is available to you here, or alternatives for a current selection. So I can come in and say select this letter R. I can say alternatives for the current selection, and it will show me the alternative letters that are available to me for that specific letter that I have selected, right? So those are glyphs, a bit of what they can do. And yeah, they come in handy depending on what you're trying to create overall. So the last thing I wanted to touch on before we go ahead and glance at Adobe InDesign is this, our touch type tool. Now this thing is fun. This was an addition to Illustrator maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. This tool feature was added, and what it allows you to do, notice as I click, it's selecting one letter at a time. It allows you to select one letter and make manipulations to that one letter. So I can make that one letter larger. I can rotate that one letter, turn it all the way upside down. There's all kinds of options. I can move that one letter wherever I want. I can easily switch between the letters I'm manipulating by clicking on a new letter and manipulating that new letter that we are looking at. So that's what our touch type tool does, and it's pretty cool. Comes in handy depending on what you're trying to make. Now, of course, if you get too crazy with it, you can completely affect your readability. You can completely affect your readability in a negative way, so you want to be careful and be mindful of your intentions and your reasons when using this specific tool. But know that it is available to you. It's at your fingertips, and you can use it for a variety of different reasons, right? Now, before we sign off on this particular lecture, I want us to come over for a moment and glance at InDesign. And a lot of the different options that we just covered, that we just talked about in InDesign, are also available in Adobe Illustrator, or that we just talked about, excuse me, in Adobe Illustrator, or available in InDesign as well. So we have our character panel, our paragraph panel. Notice that they look kind of similar to what we just experienced. We have our character styles. We have our paragraph styles. They do the same thing that I just told you about in Adobe Illustrator. And then in addition to this, we also have our glyphs panel. And this holds true in Adobe Illustrator as well. Depending on what typeface you're in, notice how the glyphs will change, because your glyph options are different depending on which software program you are using. Or I'm sorry, your glyph options are different depending on what typeface you are looking at. It'll all depend on what is contained within its font file, right? So that's a bit of the technology that goes along with our typography. And there's all kinds of different really cool things that you can do with your type in terms of manipulations and making changes. Coming back over to Adobe Illustrator, when our type tool is actively selected, I want you to notice that along the top of the screen, we have access to our character panel, our paragraph panel, and a few other options as well. So there's all kinds of different handy dandy tools at your fingertips in relation to our software availability, and what you're able to do with them, making changes, manipulations, and alterations to your designs, right? So that's all I have for you for this specific information. I know it was a whole lot. If you need to, watch this multiple times and go and play with the program. The only way that you are really going to wrap your mind around what's available to you and what its true capabilities are is if you sit with this software, with both of them, with Illustrator, with InDesign, and you spend time really getting to know what is available to you. Inside of InDesign, there are options that we didn't even cover. So inside of types and tables, there's all kinds of different other options that we haven't even had a chance to cover. And I don't deem them as specifically urgent for us to cover right now at this point of our design journey with each other. But it could be good and fun for you to go into the software and just play around with those things and see what they do, right? All right, that's all I have for you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, y'all. Peace.